Welcome back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back with you for another talk. This time we've got Dragoljub, who is a military analyst, and he writes for a bunch of portals online. He has been gracious enough to stop by. Welcome, Dragoljub. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. It's great having you. Thank you very much for calling me to your show, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here.
He's known online as Drago Bosnić. We discussed this offline because Westerners can't say "lj."
Yeah, it's pretty hard for them to. It's pretty hard for them to pronounce that. It's it's anything but Dragoljub. It's usually Dragoljub or something like that, which is hilarious for me. So generally, and also my previous editor from the Fort Russ News, you talked to him, Mr. Flores. He's a brilliant analyst, by the way, and a great intellectual. So he actually suggested me to use the name Drago as a way to, to make it easier for everyone to pronounce and easier to remember. So I have him to thank for that.
Excellent. Let me get one of your recent articles in the background here, and why don't we get right to it? Being a military analyst, tell us your opinion of Russia's special military operation 1 year on, and what you had written here in this article. This is for BRICS information portal, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or just shortened. It's shortened from InfoBRICS. Well, essentially, when it comes to this special military operation, as they call it in Russia, it's important to understand first that it's pretty limited in scope. It's not a full-blown war. At least the Russians don't see it that way. It has limited objectives, and the thing is, most of the time, the Western media, what they like to do is they like to present the Russians as they've actually failed the operation because they didn't take the largest country in Europe in 2 days or whatever they were expecting to happen. The point is, the first objective of the operation, as President Putin actually outlined it, it's demilitarization. So what that means is they want to destroy the Ukrainian military, basically. And they want to make it possible for them to completely wipe out the fighting capabilities of the Kiev regime. I like to use the word Kiev regime because it's not really Ukraine. I wouldn't call the country that Russia is fighting Ukraine, because I think millions of Ukrainians actually don't have a choice, in the matter of whether they want a war with Russia or don't. I'm pretty sure they never wanted it. But the point is, the Kiev regime, which is an exponent of the political West, basically a NATO proxy, they chose the war, of course. So just to get that out of the way. So that's and for when it comes to the rest of the story about the campaign, I think it's been pretty successful, more successful than the West is trying to present it.
So you're a Russian propagandist that is paid by the Kremlin, and you don't believe the story that the great Kiev counteroffensive pushed the Russians out of Kiev?
Yeah, exactly.
This is a comedy channel. By the way, everybody who's new here, this is a comedy channel. Like, share, subscribe. We don't talk about geopolitics. This is only for comedic purposes and amusement. No, exactly. Seriously speaking though, so the Kiev feint, as it is sometimes referred to, or the locking down action. Tell us what you think about that while I play some video of AP's, let's say, breakdown of that in the background.
Yeah, well, that operation, we could call it that because it's really hard to take a city of 3 to 4 million people with only maybe 20,000 soldiers who participated in that operation in the north of Ukraine. It's what Scott actually called a few times. He called that shaping up the battlefield, right? So I would call it that way too, because essentially, the Russians were trying to spread out the Kiev regime forces, or as they call the AFU. I wouldn't call it that way, but anyway, I usually use the term Kiev regime forces. So the point is, they actually managed to tie in a lot of, their forces in the north, and then take all these areas in the east and the south. But the thing is, because it was limited in scope, this operation was, how can I say, it wasn't as successful as the Russians themselves expected it to be. But I would never call it a failure, because they actually took a lot of land in Ukraine, and they still hold a lot of land in what was Ukraine before the war.
When you say a lot of land, we're talking how many Belgiums or how many Greeces?
Yeah, that's the point. Exactly. And many of the NATO commanders in these Western European armies, they themselves, they said, we couldn't hold a front, which was longer for more than 80 kilometers or 90 kilometers. So if any of the Western militaries were to conduct the same operation in Ukraine, I don't think they would be any better. I think they would actually be much worse in doing that than the Russians were.
Yeah. Speak a little bit to the future, let's say, possibility of what's going to happen when the Western or NATO tanks get to Ukraine. As a military analyst, I'm sure you get the importance of logistics, and each of these tanks has a different supply chain. Each of them need all their maintenance and whatnot. So speak a little bit to that subject and familiarize the audience maybe with that a little bit.
Exactly. So first of all, tanks and all the other equipment that any military uses, it has to be made for the terrain where it's supposed to be used, right? So the thing is, Western tanks are, we could say, are giant, pretty heavy, and they're not very good for for using them on the Ukrainian soil, because the soil is so muddy that it would be a disaster to use a tank like an Abrams or a Leopard, German Leopard. There are videos of Ukrainian tanks which are 50% lighter than most Western tanks, getting stuck in the mud in Ukraine. So what do you think? How is it going to look like for Western tanks like Abrams or Leopard? So also, as you mentioned, the logistics, these are very complicated machines, especially Western tanks. And in order to use them effectively, you have to keep the logistics in one place, which means that they have to be in one place, making them a very easy target for the Russians. So you can't have 20 tanks in 20 different places. They have to be in the same place because you simply can't manage the logistics of it. And I'm not sure it's going to be very smart to put these very expensive, complex machines in one place where the Russians can just target them all at the same time.
So basically you're saying that there's not much it's not going to make a big difference, the whole NATO tank narrative. All right.
Exactly.
More Russian propaganda. Like, share, and subscribe. But no, shifting a little bit to more thermonuclearly apocalyptic seriousness. Tell us about this article that you also wrote recently that you sent along as one of the topics. This is how should I say, a consequence of Putin's speech, I believe. And what would you say is the key takeaway from this article that you wrote?
Well, the key point is that Russia has suspended its participation in this strategic reduction arms control treaty. That's what START basically stands for. And this was the last nuclear arms control treaty between the US, or actually, should we say, NATO and Russia. So it's pretty big news, because that means that we no longer have any limitations for the number of nuclear delivery weapons that both sides can actually use or deploy. So the thing about that is that that means that in the next, let's say, 5 or 6 years, or even 10 years, we could see an escalation of the number of strategic weapons that are actually online in both countries. So that's basically going back to the Cold War era when we had tens of thousands of nukes pointed at both sides. So that's pretty dangerous. But the point is, the Russians didn't do that because they wanted to, let's have a nuclear apocalypse. That's great. The thing is, the Russians had to do it because the Americans were not implementing the agreement. So
Wait,
the point of the agreement.
So you're saying that Putin is not crazy?
Yeah. Like, can you imagine that? Putin is not crazy as they. I mean, the interesting thing about Putin being crazy is that they keep telling us that he's crazy, but also that he's weak. But he has all these nukes, like, so if the guy is crazy, as they claim, well, shouldn't they like try to talk to him, like try to avoid the Armageddon, the coming Armageddon, if he's that crazy? So like the point is, like, their points like about him, like they don't hold together, like they're pretty illogical, I would say.
There's a lot of Putler propaganda out there, and if one looks even for like let's say 1 hour of any video on this channel or some other channels on YouTube, we'll leave a link here. Putin is not unprovoked, and Russia is not unprovoked. Like all those famous YouTube channels that like talk about laundry and like car shows and like airplane shows, and then have to mention and the war in Ukraine where Putin unprovoked entered. Yeah, no, it's not unprovoked. There's a lot of geopolitical stuff, but to stay on the subject of thermonuclear apocalypse, there's another article that you sent that you also wrote about the absurd U.S. propaganda claims that China has more ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic and nuclear missiles, than America does.
Yeah, that was a funny one because like Western media, they like to spin the narrative all the time, and I'm sure you've noticed that as well as your viewers. So
just to clear up, you're also from Serbia. I'm from Serbia, so we've grew up on this. Like we've been fed this Western duality paradigm from our preteen years, basically. Continue. Sorry. Interrupt.
You're right. You're right. I mean, basically, we've been listening to stories of us eating babies and whatnot. Basically, I remember like as a kid, I used to watch these movies, and like there was this completely senseless segment of the movie, which was like 20 seconds, where they had to like put a dialogue where the Serbs are like the worst monsters ever. So I remember that, and this is not much different. The article that they wrote about the so-called dominance of China over the U.S. It's ridiculous because like the U.S. arsenal is like 12 to 15 times bigger than the Chinese one. So that's why I'd say it's propaganda, because it really is, and they based that on so-called satellite imagery, which supposedly shows the Chinese are making like 300 launchers, like in the ground, like silos for missiles. So the point is, the Chinese don't have that many nuclear weapons to actually, create an arsenal which is bigger than the U.S. So that's why I think it's propaganda.
And I think there's a lot of those nuclear silos that are like duds, basically.
Exactly.
That are built to like draw attention away from the real ones. I mean, exactly.
And the interesting thing is, the irony in this whole thing is that the Chinese were actually inspired by the Americans from the Cold War, because during the Jimmy Carter presidency, the Americans actually planned on building a lot of these like fake silos, duds, as you said, and the Chinese drew inspiration from that. And the point is, of course, that the enemy will not know if it's a dud or a real silo with a missile with nukes in it. So that's the point. Like if you see 5,000 of these silos, then like it's very, very useful for the side which is building them, because first of all, the enemy will think you have 5,000 nukes. That's the first thing. And the other thing is, like even if you don't have those 5,000 nukes, if the enemy wants to launch a first strike, then they have to get all 5,000, because they have no idea where the real nukes are. So it's like it has multifaceted like advantages, gives you multifaceted advantages. So I think that's why the Chinese are doing it. It's pretty smart, like instead of like building actual 5,000 missiles like the USSR did.
Considering we're on the subject of China, tell me and the viewers what you think is the likelihood, let's say, of a Chinese incursion into Taiwan. Considering, you know, the SMO, considering China's one China policy, considering Nancy Pelosi and, like, you know, first island chain, second island chain, etc., etc.
Well, you know, the thing is, it's any possible incursions into Taiwan would be much more complicated than what Russia is doing, because it's a land war in Russia, and here it would be like basically like a combined arms operations, which would include a lot of the Chinese military. And you know, it's very easy to destroy ships which are trying to land on the shores of Taiwan. It's much easier than destroying, you know, thousands of tanks going over the land border. So the Chinese would have a much bigger challenge, especially if the U.S. like delivers a lot of these anti-ship missiles to the Taiwanese military, which they're doing covertly, as far as I know. And also if they deliver a lot of, you know, like jets and missiles for these jets. So the thing is, the Americans are pushing this simply by arming Taiwan, you know, like just by delivering like tens of billions of dollars worth of weapons to the Taiwanese military. They are basically provoking China to do this, because the Chinese will have no choice, you know, because even the US accepts that Taiwan is part of China. So if they were to, let's say, recognize Taiwan as an independent state, that would directly undermine China's territorial integrity. So the Chinese would have to respond to that. So like they would be forced to do that by law. So the point is,
do you think it would be an immediate invasion, or do you think it would be like a naval blockade like they had of Cuba back in the day, and then something an escalation from there if there's no like you know, capitulation, let's put it that way?
Yeah, they would have to conduct a naval blockade, because of course the Americans and, you know, their vassals in the Asia Pacific, they would certainly try to, you know, like get to Taiwan and, you know, deliver weapons or whatever the Taiwanese need. So China wouldn't be able to like conduct that operation successfully without a naval blockade. And considering that the Chinese Navy is expanding, you know, considerably, they would be able to do that pretty quickly. So, I mean, in a matter of weeks, like Taiwan wouldn't, actually days, maybe even days, Taiwan would not be able to get any kind of help from the outside. But the point is, the Americans, they want China to get into a war like that, because it's going to be a slugfest. You know, like it's not easy to take an island fast. So unless, of course, the people in Taiwan, like, you know, we can speculate how the people of Taiwan feel about all this. And how they feel about getting, you know, back in like into the Chinese fold. But if they were smart, and I hope they are, they would never fight for the Americans. Like they wouldn't die in the way that the Ukrainians are dying, you know, senselessly for the interests of the Washington D.C. So I hope they're going to they will have more wisdom to not become, you know, victims, you know, in a possible U.S. scheme to basically, you know, like stop China's rise towards a superpower status.
Yeah. Tell us about your next article that you sent along about this new Russian frigate. What is this new Russian frigate, and why does it concern NATO?
Yeah, that's the Admiral Gorshko.
Or is it just like a class? Is it a class of frigate?
Yeah, it's a class of one. At the moment, there's only one which is like 100% operational in the Russian Navy, but there are two more which are basically like running tests, and like they're being they're just getting them into service. But there's only one at the moment which is like 100% operational, and the reason why it's so dangerous is because it can deploy hypersonic weapons like the Zircon, or Zircon as they call it. It's a hypersonic scramjet-powered cruise missile. Which is capable of speeds up to Mach 9, which means like it's 9 times faster than the speed of sound. So basically, it's invulnerable to any kind of missile defense systems that the American or any other ship can have. So it's pretty much like if the ship fires that on a group of like carrier strike group, then that group is pretty much, you know, done. Like there's no way to defend against that. So One ship can, at the moment, can carry like up to 16 missiles, but they're actually going to expand that in the newer ships, newer versions of the same class. They're going to expand that to 32, which means like you have 32 missiles which can destroy like every ship you can imagine, because you simply can't shoot it down, because oftentimes you can't even see it, and because these missiles are so fast.
32 missiles. When you say 32 missiles, that's not the full load. That's the complement that's ready to launch at any time. Plus, they have the reloadable ones, correct?
Actually, that's that's the whole number of the missiles which are hypersonic. The frigate actually has other weapons too, like other missiles, like air defense missiles and anti-ship missiles and so on. Like it can carry like a lot of missiles. It can carry like hundreds of missiles. But the point is, those 32 missiles.
How many launchers? Do you know how many launchers it has for the Zircon? Like 4 launchers, or is it 32 launchers that are capable of carrying the Zircon?
Well, there are different types of launchers, but most of those that can carry like up to at this point it has 4 with like 4 missiles in each, but that can go up to 32. Like they have enough space for 32.
They're like cells, basically. It's like plug and play.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Those are like vertical universal launchers, which they can hold different types of missiles, because they were designed to hold like different types of missiles, not just hypersonic, but also like regular cruise missiles, which are much cheaper. So the point is, like, if you look at the launchers, you have no idea what's inside. Like it could be 32 caliber missiles, it could be 32 hypersonic missiles like the Zircon, it could be like different types of weapons. And the point is, this is also very important for deterrence, because you have no idea, like the enemy has no idea what you have.
Yeah, so it's like a shotgun basically, and you don't know if it's like buckshot inside or a slug shell, basically. Yeah.
Exactly.
One of the next articles that you sent along was this one about the WikiLeaks, the cables that reveal NATO intended to cross all Russian red lines. Now, WikiLeaks, we all know, is definitely Russian propaganda.
Yep.
as is everything that goes against the narrative.
Absolutely.
Like, share, and subscribe. But yeah, the point is, clue us in on what these WikiLeaks cables reveal, because I haven't heard of this until you sent it along. Like many of the stories that we cover here, they get not quite enough coverage. Go on.
Yeah, I wonder why. The thing is, I'm not going to go into too much detail because the article is pretty long. The thing is, it basically like lists all the every time when a Western official or a Western expert warned their own government that pushing NATO into Ukraine is going to inevitably cause a Russian reaction. And the thing is, even some ambassadors, like U.S. ambassadors to Russia, were warning this, like they were telling this to their own government. But of course, the government, they wouldn't listen, or they listened, but they still went ahead with that, which I think it's the other thing. But anyway, like I leave that to the viewers to come to that conclusion, of course. So the thing is, I think, and judging by what the WikiLeaks data shows, I think they planned on doing all this all along, because the point is, it's not just about like getting Russia and getting all their natural resources. It's also about having an external enemy, and for NATO to continue existing and to have like a reason, for existing, they need an enemy like Russia, because Russia is the only country which is close to NATO which has the capability to jeopardize them. So of course the Russians don't want that. They just want cooperation, like normal economic cooperation, and that's all for Russia. But the thing is, the West pushed Russia into all this because simply they need a reason, reason to exist as a unified political front.
Yeah. You in your bio, it also says you're a geopolitical analyst. So geopolitically speaking, we've been talking on this channel for like basically since we started about how Russia is not exactly unprovoked, and like for the last 200 plus years there has been like a conspiracy, let's say, or like a political theory, or like a reality in practice of trying to hem Russia in and keep them from developing and keep them from being able to link up with, let's say, the German basin and the Danube basin, and on the other side, Japan, and so on and so forth. And to like speak to that, this is a video. I'm gonna play it with audio so we can watch it together. This is a video that came out on Chinese, I believe, state television, translated to English with subtitles. It was originally Chinese television, but for the Russian audience, so it was in Russian, and then it was translated by this channel on Telegram called Punger's Cat. It's a very productive cat, and lots of good translations come from it. But it's a video showing the possible or probable or hypothetical attack on the Nord Stream, which is obviously, we don't know who done it.
Yep. I'm sure U.S. had nothing to do with it.
That there's that one Polish minister who tweeted "Thank you, America," but then he deleted his tweet because he doesn't know that pipelines explode by themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, they've been doing that since like '89. So let's watch this video, and give us your opinion on the military capabilities. Hold on, let me put it big screen.
If Russia invades, there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
I don't know, it all looks suspiciously like Russian propaganda to me.
Yeah, I think the Russians did that. Yeah, I think Russians destroyed their own pipeline.
But why would they just turn it off? Doesn't make sense to just turn it off.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always better to just destroy all this stuff. It's much harder to just press a button.
Let's watch this to the end. I heard theories that there's only a limited amount of navies that can go that deep.
Yep.
With the specialist gear.
And the U.S. is not one of them, 100%.
No, yeah, definitely.
I think Denmark did it, maybe. They have the capability.
Oh, and they have pipelines there too, so they have like the motive. There you go.
Yeah. Denmark is to blame.
This video is about a minute long, but it's got some really good information in it. I just want to put it out there on the record because, there's things on Telegram which you won't see on YouTube. And it's not like you don't see them on TV, you just need to watch TV in other countries.
Yeah.
And we all know from our subscribers regularly that basically you can't even access, some information sources in the West. But thank God for things like webarchive.org.
Yep.
Which basically allow you to go through the... it's only going to take at least a year and 500 million to repair. So that's not bad. It's not unrepairable from that perspective.
Yeah. But yeah, it gives Americans a head start of 1 year to, an ability to sell their own super cheap LNG.
I don't know. Tremendous opportunity for Americans is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
How foolish of the Russians to destroy their own pipeline. Now they're giving Americans the ability to sell more gas to Europe.
Yeah.
You have to wait a while. But meanwhile, you look at the credibility of that reporter against the credibility of those who criticize him. And on this case, Cy Hirsch wins.
So, Seymour Hersh has come out recently and started to, talk, or at least put two and two together. As a reporter yourself, you could probably speak to who Seymour Hersh is for those who don't know, and maybe lead into what his revelations have been recently.
Yeah, like he's probably one of the most famous, let's say, independent reporters in the world, and he's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, and he's probably one of the best journalists in the world, like hands down. And the thing that he discovered in his own analysis is pretty striking, because I mean it's obvious to most people who are informed enough that the U.S. did this because, I mean, they said they will do it. I mean, and as you mentioned, many of them, and we also saw that in the video, many of them were actually bragging about, destroying it and destroying the Nord Stream 2 and Nord Stream 1 actually. So, and also for example, the great humanitarian Victoria Nuland, she mentioned that in the Congress, in the U.S. Congress, when she said that. Yeah, when she said now Nord Stream is a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea. So, I mean, do you really need more proof than that? And what Mr. Hersh did is he actually gave the proof. He gave solid proof that the U.S. did that with the help of their Northern European vassals, particularly Norway. And as you mentioned, there are very few militaries, or in this case navies, which have the capability to go that deep and conduct an operation like that. And the interesting thing is they planted these explosives before Russia intervened in Ukraine. So that's pretty indicative, of what they were planning to do regardless, regardless if the Russians intervened or anything. And when you mentioned the geopolitical aspect of it all, it's pretty clear that the Americans and these Anglo empires as a whole, in the entire human history for the last 5 centuries, they've been trying to prevent the formation of a continental bloc of nations like Russia and Germany and France and such countries, because that would basically destroy their hegemony. That's why I usually use the term telesocracy for countries like the US and the British Empire, because they are telesocracies. They are like naval superpowers, and their primary goal is to prevent.
Telesocracy. First time I hear the term.
Telesocracy is like a naval power. Those are countries which base their power on naval power projection. So, yeah, exactly. So, as we already know, America, for example, has the largest and the most powerful navy in the world. They have dozens of capital ships, big ships. They have at least a dozen of these large super carriers and carrier strike groups, which are all over the world. Basically, they're stationed and they are basically moving all around the planet and the world ocean, basically, and they are projecting power anywhere they want. And oftentimes these super carriers, they carry more jets than many countries have on land. So they can impose their will on these countries. They can use them in interventions or invasions. Those interventions. They call them interventions, but that's a euphemism. Let's just call it what it is. It's an invasion or an aggression. So they use those in aggressions against basically the entire planet. So if you don't want to sell your natural resources for the worthless green paper that the Americans are printing into oblivion, then you will get, you will have a lot of these human rights issues, and then the American carriers will need to go and enforce the law, the international law, to help you to, stop.
It's the rules-based order. No, it's the rules-based order. What we want is international law. That's what they don't follow, but they enforce the new rules-based order, as they refer to it themselves.
Yeah, the rules which they they just change whenever they want. Yeah,
it's impromptu. and it's different depending on every situation. You know, like Ursula von der Leyen or von der whatever her name is.
Von der Leyen.
The gynecologist from the EU, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly.
Comedy show, because we're living in a clown world. So the gynecologist from the EU says that the territorial integrity of Ukraine is very important, and we all know that her stance on the territorial integrity of Serbia, who they want so much to be a European member, is not exactly, you know, the same.
A priority. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
As a former Yugoslav, you were born in Yugoslavia, yeah? You're like not younger than that, I presume. So, you as a former Yugoslav, how would you see this two-faced and like duality and like hypocrisy and you know?
Well, I see
having
this.
in mind the Serbian current perspective with the Kosovo issue that is still ongoing, like let's say lingering problems from the breakup of Yugoslavia. To like finish my question and put it all into perspective for the viewers. Yeah,
the thing about us, like from former Yugoslavia, especially Serbs, we don't even have to go to Ukraine, like go to that extent to understand the sheer magnitude of the hypocrisy that we are facing. We just have to look at our own like situation in the region. For instance, they will say that independent Kosovo is like a reality because we don't have Serbs living there anymore. I mean, that tends to happen when you expel all the Serbs from Kosovo, and then you wonder why there are no Serbs there. On the other hand, they're not using the same logic when it comes to, for example, Republika Srpska in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So. Why is Kosovo reality, like independent Kosovo is reality, but on the other hand, Republika Srpska is not reality? So, hypocrisy, their hypocrisy when it comes to international law is it's very visible here. But if we take into account Ukraine and other areas around the planet, it becomes even more glaringly obvious.
Yeah, we could talk about that for days, and we probably will next time you come back. We'll probably bring up the former Yugoslavia issue. Is there anything that you would like to draw attention to other than those couple of articles that you've sent me? I mean, taking into account any of the current developments or something recent that's been going on in country 404, as some people call it. Ukrainistan, others, the former Ukraine, I think, is the most official term that should be used, considering the former Yugoslavia was a thing.
We could say former Ukraine 100% because that country has been non-existent, I think, at least since 2014 after the neo-Nazi coup, or as they call it, the freedom and democracy coup.
Is that what it's really called? It can't be called that.
Well, they say that Euromaidan or Maidan, whichever term they prefer, was a completely legitimate democratic uprising against the dictator Yanukovych. Yeah, that's basically what the Wikipedia says, or any other Western media source. They will claim it was completely peaceful and there were no problems with that, and no genocidal maniac became the president after that. So that's all fine. The real bad people are, of course, the Donbas people who, actually rose up against. Yeah, the Russians. The Russians are the bad side here because they rose up against all this democracy and freedom that they were being exposed to, usually from cannons and multiple rocket launchers.
I can't help but notice that this paradigm and lens that it's being looked through is anti-Russian in the same way that it used to be anti-Serb and still is to some extent. Whereas any land that is occupied by Serbs is de facto not Serbian.
Exactly.
So any land in the Donbass that is occupied by Russians is de facto Ukrainian from the NATO perspective.
Exactly.
Striking similarities.
Very, very striking similarities. And the interesting thing is now the propaganda is starting to is trying to portray this entire area of Ukraine and southern Russia and these other areas as never having to do anything with each other. Ukraine is a completely different country from Russia. They never have had anything to do with each other, which is completely ridiculous in every sense actually, historically specifically, because the Ukrainians and Russians are inseparable. Their histories are inseparable in every way imaginable. So like you cannot have the history of Ukraine without the history of Russia, and vice versa, of course, because like Kiev was called the mother of the Russian cities for a very good reason, and it was one of the first capitals of Russia. So like the whole problem in the case of Ukraine and Russia, I think it's a better analogy in our case would be Montenegro and Serbia. Like they usually like to use the example of Croatia and Serbia, but I think a better example would be Montenegro and Serbia, because a very similar thing happened to us in Montenegro. Like the Serbs who were living there, they had a problem because they were being suppressed, their nationality, their language, their religion, and the same thing happened in Ukraine. So basically, what we are seeing now in Ukraine, it will be the same thing if Serbia intervened when Montenegro was being detached from Serbia in 2006, for example.
Yeah. I don't know. Is there anything else you'd like to draw attention to while we close this one off? We've been going for about 40 minutes. I think people got to know you pretty well, and then we can record another one in a bit and get to some more serious questions.
Yeah. I would just like to say, like a message to the American people. I think what the Americans themselves should do is to think about the people who are leading them. Like, for example, Tucker Carlson always likes to say that America is sleepwalking into a World War III. But what I think is that it's going, very, very consciously into World War III, because the people in power in Washington, D.C., they don't care. Like these people, these are the people who managed to lose a war against AK-wielding, outgunned and outnumbered, insurgents in sandals, while spending like trillions of dollars and sending hundreds of thousands of troops over the 20-year period. And they lost the war, and if we talk about the technological discrepancy, it could be measured in centuries, not just like decades. Literally, like America is centuries ahead of the Taliban in terms of technological prowess of its military. So, and they managed to lose that war, So why do they think they can win against Russia? Like, I really would like to know that. Like, what's the logic behind their thinking, like that they can win against Russia, a country which has been defeating invaders for more than 1,000 years. Like, why do they think that? A country with like 6,000 nuclear weapons. Like, I think the Americans should just think about this for a second. And the same people who were telling them that Ukraine is going to retake Crimea, for example, can you imagine that? Like believing that Ukraine is going to retake Crimea? Like, imagine the level of stupidity.
We discussed it recently with Wyatt from Defense Politics Asia. I'll leave a link somewhere. But like, it's excellent. It's excellent I can't even express myself. It's just it's ludicrous.
Ludicrous.
Yeah. On that note, here is a little video that considering you said the Americans are sleepwalking into World War III. I came across this little hilarious clip. I'll just play it, and we'll come back 1 second.
Near and dear to you that you like to be able to. Anyway.
Okay, I just wanted to play that because I saw that and it was hilarious. I just wanted to share that on this comedy show because it is a comedy show after all. So do you think Biden is a robot or do you think he's just senile? Do you think he's like Elon Musk and Obama's neural implant?
Yeah, I think the guy's perfectly healthy. The official doctor of the White House said that he's perfectly mentally fit. So who am I to question that? I'm no medical expert. So.
All right, makes sense. All right, Dragoljub Bosnić or Drago, right? That's how you go by. Drago Bosnić. You can find him everywhere. He is a geopolitical and military analyst. I will leave a link to where he writes most often in the description. Thank you for joining us for this first half. I'm going to play some music, take it out. Everybody, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for being here. Goodbye.